You're listening to the Table Talk podcast, brought to you by the team at Food Matters. Welcome to the Table Talk podcast, brought to you by Food Matters. In these podcasts, we explore a huge range of crucial issues and exciting developments in the food industry, with brilliant guests drawn from all areas of expertise. I'm Stephen Gates. I'm a TV presenter and writer specialising in food and science. Today, we're joined by Professor Tim Spector, Professor of Genetic Epidemiology and Director of the TwinsUK Registry from King's College London. He's a hugely respected researcher and author of the best-selling The Diet Myth. His new book is called Spoonfed, Why Almost Everything We've Been Told About Food is Wrong. Welcome, Tim.
Hello there.
Could you start off by doing my job for me and just giving us the short pitch for the book?
Short pitch for the book is really that the title Spoonfed suggests really that the way we've been told about nutrition is very much a one-way exercise. As if we were babies, we've been told to eat in a certain way, that there's a certain amount, the right way of eating, exactly how many calories, exactly we should be having low fats and grazing, not gorging, and basically lots of myths that it turns out, are not based on actual science and should be really reversed. And the book is really a mixture of how we've been fooled by the food industry, aided by government, into this oversimplistic idea of food in order to sell us more highly processed products and increase stuff on labels that the British people seem to really like. And this mixed with the idea that one size does fit all, whether it's what food is good or what food is bad, but in as far as, there is such thing as good diet guidelines, and having 2,000 calories is going to be perfect for all women and 2,500 calories for all men. And so the idea that most of the information we're getting at the moment is correct, and B, that, we are the average person, we should do exactly as the average study shows, is really totally flawed. And they're the two things. So one ends up, the logical conclusion is that we need to move towards personalized nutrition approaches, because there isn't one diet that does suit everybody, and we know that we respond massively differently to the same food. And the other is that we all need to become experts, because unfortunately we can no longer trust the food companies and the government to give us the very best advice.
Now, I'm really interested in the main title, Spoon-Fed, because it seems to imply something really interesting about us as consumers. Are we stupid? Are we incurious? Are we too accepting of what we're told by everyone else? Although I think a lot of what that you, especially your bugbears, salt, coffee, calories, vitamin pills, yogurts, things like that, a lot of that information also comes from places like the school gate. It's about gossip. It's about people just like the phatic communication of people just sending out mantras and assumptions about food. Do you think we should expect more of ourselves?
Yeah, I do. And I think this gossip, this talk about food is quite natural, because, we're all daily users of food. We all make hundreds of food choices every day. And we lack a strong food culture that inherently tells us what's good and bad. We don't have no longer have the grandmother effect that other Mediterranean countries have, that would tell you this is, the perfect dish, this is the way to eat it, and this is what previous generations have done. So there's this lack of knowledge, fired up by huge choice in what we eat, and confusion in all areas about what is healthy and unhealthy, with being seized on by the marketing people to increase that confusion, so that in a way we then return to what we're so happy with, our old habits, because you say, oh, well, no one really understands this, so it doesn't matter what I eat. I'm going to go back to whatever the cheapest thing is near the till.
Now, before we get into the question of why these lies just continue and perpetuated or self-perpetuating, let's just delve into a couple of the specifics. So, you certainly talked about breakfast is not necessarily the most important meal of the day. And again, these are sort of mantras. Some of these are centuries old.
Yes,
aren't
and
they?
the history of food is quite interesting because we tend to sort of forget, that it wasn't that long ago when we never had breakfast, but certainly for the last 100 years, since even longer, bit the Victorian era, we've been told that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Then, of course, all the breakfast cereal companies came in and reinforced that idea, and it became a mantra. And there was a whole series of publicity campaigns to sell British eggs to mothers who were meant to feel guilty if they didn't, give their children eggs in the morning. They were doing something terrible to them. And it became very much associated with being British as well, the importance of breakfast, which you don't see in other countries. And so this rather bleak view of food, which was, served up by governments to shift dairy produce, but also cereal manufacturers, etc., making it sort of mandatory to have this. And it's amazing that even when the science starts to show that it's not necessary, because they were saying that if you skip breakfast, for example, you just inevitably got fatter and you got so hungry in the day, and your kid would run amok in the school and start, sort of attacking everyone. And it simply wasn't true. And in the last few years, we've done lots of studies now showing that, on average, you certainly don't get fatter if you skip breakfast, and on average you get slightly thinner. But of course, there's a huge range because some people, do very well on breakfast and others don't. And it shouldn't be mandated that everyone at every age has to have breakfast, or even the concept of you necessarily have to have, 3 full meals and 3 snacks a day, which is where we are now in the current environment. And it's very interesting why it persisted so long, and it still persists. If you go to the NHS websites now, they still say, don't skip meals, as if there's some science behind that. So, lots of people don't always feel hungry, and we're told, oh, that's bad if you skip a meal. And I think, and people get very emotive when I talked about this on Breakfast TV a couple of weeks ago, and people, vitriolic comments about as if I was trying to attack the British breakfast and take something away that was so important to us. And and I was trying to explain, actually, I like breakfast, but it doesn't mean you need it. And some people don't feel they ever need to have breakfast. They much prefer their meals at the end of the day. And this is just another illustration of how we're different, but also how we've been misled.
Now, and one of these areas as well is calories. Tell us a little bit more about your take on the falsehoods around calories.
Well, calories have been around as over a century, and they were calculated by this American chemist, and it's totally dominated our view of food. You can't go to any supermarket without having these big calorie labels stuck over everything. And calorie counting is the main way of supposedly losing weight. And it turns out that the way calories are calculated are very inaccurate, can be out by 25%. And that's on food ingredients. They're even worse when you start putting them in restaurants and cafes and takeaways, because that's down to enter portion sizes, and small differences get multiplied as you get down to the practical realities outside a factory. And so, but we're sold that this is some really precise measure, and that if you eat exactly the right amount of calories, we know how much you're going to burn the other end, and so therefore it's very easy to use that to lose weight. And there's so many things wrong with it. Even skilled nutritionists can't count their calories, and when they're also hugely inaccurate because They don't account for the way the food is broken down or processed, how easy it is to absorb. And we know that different people will generate different amount of energy from the same food as well because of our own internal differences. So, calories obviously are real. I'm not a calorie denier in the sense, but by having this obsession that we can use calories to pick the best foods, to pick the best diets, we're totally obscuring the fact that quality is much more important and non-processed food is much more important. And it's really painful to watch these, this whole industry that's come around about, okay, we know how much calories are in a donut versus, the salad, and you've got your Fitbit watch that tells you how many calories you just burnt, and therefore you can allow yourself this, as if this calories in, calories out is actually anything vaguely practical. And of course, we're hugely different in not only how we use, how we create energy from food, but also much more different in terms of the calories we burn. And this, we're unable to measure it accurately at all, but we all know that if we eat the same meals, some people will get fat and some people will get thin. So purely, it's just rubbish, the fact that there is these levels, and it, I think, really detracts from people understanding about food in a way that totally suits the big food companies, because they can sell anything as low calorie.
So do I need to throw out my McCants and Widdowson's composition of food now? That was my Bible on trying to understand what the heck was in food.
I think that's just, it's good to know what's in it, but I think it needs to go to the next level, because we now know that the average bit of food contains at least 26,000 different chemicals in the average foods we're eating. And
so this is the interesting point, I think, that fascinates me. So you're explaining that there are more complexities, that there are different bodies and different physiology will cope with food in different ways. Isn't that why the food industry simplifies things, because it's too much for people to handle, or do you think it's peddling falsehoods?
I think it's more the latter. But they probably don't think they're falsehoods. They just are simplifying what they see as the facts in a way that suits their purpose. So the general idea, and it's also the government's view, is that we're a bit too dumb to actually understand what's going on, and there's no point in really educating us. And the only way really is to just focus on the very simplistic idea of fats, sugars, salt, and calories, and nothing else really matters. And I think it's industry and public health and government that for the last 20 years have been pointing in the same direction and helping each other out, making ultra-processed food cheaper. And but the side effect is it's been making us unhealthy.
Yeah. No. I mean, the other side to this is that you could say that processing food is cooking it. When I make a bolognese, there's probably about 20 ingredients in it by the time I've finished, and then there are various different compounds within those ingredients, whether I wanted them there or not. Tomato has, contains the substances that there would be 8 different E numbers in it if they had to be labelled on the tomato. And you mentioned bliss points. Now, a French chef making a delicious jus to pop on top of a béarnaise sauce in soaked steak would be looking for bliss points. Why is it different, do you think, when we're talking about it in this way?
I think because the elements are, and we're talking about ultra-processed food rather than processed food, because most food is processed. I mean, even sourdough bread is processed. Artisan cheese is processed. So I think it's where all these sort of ingredients are derivatives of other ingredients rather than the original food, and you're mixing them up in big vats and testing them against panels of volunteers to see which of this combination of the fats and the air and the sugar composition of these chemicals plus the flavorings make people want to eat more of it. I think it's that artificial side of things that is the big difference. And the first trial of proper randomized study seeing the effects of ultra-processed food against regular natural food was only done last year, amazingly. So it's been blocked by the industry for ages. It's incredible. This was in the US. And they put people on equivalent diets, one, made in factories and the other sort of made properly. And the difference was the people on the ultra-processed food came back to the buffet more. They always felt hungrier. They were never fully satisfied with the foods they were eating. So it's that combination of chemicals that seems to be doing things differently to what you get, to the satisfaction you get from eating the real plants and foods. When you make your spaghetti bolognese, because we all want, ultimately every chef wants to get a bliss point. But you also, you don't want to never feel full and keep coming back for that same pot. So I think it's that sort of addictive quality to it that makes them different. And also they seem to have a very different effect on our gut health as well.
And that's where a big shift comes in as well, and a lot of the work that you're doing on that, which we'll come to in a second, seems to encompass that. But I've also always been amazed at the complicity of TV presenters, people like me who go on telly. There's so many people that peddle lies and mantras about food because it makes people feel cozy. So calories, salt, coffee. The overall concept that something that has fat in is bad. Do you think that the media is generally complicit, and is that egregious as well?
I don't know. I mean, I think the fact that we haven't challenged these dogmas for so long, or until now, it is a bit of a mystery. And anyone who has in the past has been seen as a bit of a nutter, And I think food suffers a bit like religion. I think people like to belong to groups. Yeah. And we've seen this with initially vegetarianism, now particularly vegans, gluten-free people, organics, and people like to belong to a group, and therefore, TV presenters don't want to alienate lots of people, so they tend to go along with the majority opinion about, what seems to be, the sort of Church of England type approach to food, that's safe and comfortable, and no one's really going to argue with you, rather than starting to question the faith.
I think viewers actually particularly like, they feel warm and cozy with cliches and mantras. It makes them feel everything's fine as it is.
Yeah, well, these are sort of Bible stories, aren't they? But yes, one day we discovered that fats were bad for you, so now you can, have all your products low in fat, and you can assuage that guilt. There's a way around it, and you can have twice as many biscuits because they're low fat, or they've got sugar sweeteners.
Now, do you think your biggest bugbears are oversimplifications, or is it lies? And you mentioned the idea that that proteins, carbs, and fats are the building blocks of nutrition. It's much more complicated than that now. Is it those sorts of issues that most frustrate you, or is it the more the idea that there are lies being perpetuated when people know that they're wrong?
I think there is sufficient confusion to give people a way out. I don't think all these things are absolutely universal. I think what we can say is that there are certain things about nutrition we really don't know about, and other bits we do know about. And the lies are that we know it all, and that the lies are that in the NHS guidelines that full fat yogurt to low fat is good for you. So there are, but I think the people honestly believe that that's true based on old data, and they just have rigid views they don't like to change. So I don't think they're deliberately lying, particularly not, the government advisors, but, all for 20 years they've been getting grants, many of them from the food industry, saying that, they want to work on the evils of high-fat diets and, why that's bad for you. So, the industry has been very good at just confusing the field, sowing the seeds with money to get people to work in certain areas that just blur the edges to make sure that we don't ask the key critical questions, which is, why are ultra-processed foods so bad for us? And it's in a way, it's a smokescreen. Why are they paying for all these studies on sports fields in school playgrounds? Why linking sport and exercise and fizzy drinks? An idea that you can, if kids run a lot, they can eat as much rubbish as they like. It's that kind of distraction from saying, "Oh, that's good, so we need more exercise." That's the problem, rather than actually, if they didn't eat and drink this rubbish, we wouldn't have these problems at all.
Yeah. There's also we need to move this on really to the question of solutions and answers, and I've heard you talk about you have a support for the pre-watershed HFSS advertising ban to some extent, but are there positive ways to fix things rather than using sort of negatives and banning and bans and things? I mean, it's very easy to say, well, we should educate the kids, but it's a much more complex approach. Is that what has to happen? Like, are there other solutions to these problems?
They're long term and they're short. Long term, we have to educate the whole population about food, and that's got to start at nursery school. And to do that, we don't have any teachers at the moment, so we have to actually,
they've cancelled the A level.
Yeah, there's just no experts in nutrition that are useful in school. So a whole new science needs to become out about nutritional education, and that should be as important to us and probably more useful than learning algebra. But that's, as you said, a long-term thing. It's not going to fix things in the next 5 years. So the UK has the highest rates of ultra-processed food use, about over 50% of meals. Portugal, for example, has the lowest in Europe, 10%. So how can we get towards an average, get that percentage down? There's only two ways, really. One is by making plants and natural foods cheaper and more available, particularly to the poorer parts of society. And the other is dissuading people from buying the junk foods and the high sugar foods and extending the sugar tax to ultra-processed foods. I think they're the two ways you do this. You can play around with labels and things, as some countries have done, and extend advertising to ban any sort of packaging like cigarettes, and have a simpler food label. But I think essentially you've got to get a consensus in the country.
Now, there's also, I believe, the project that you've been working on as another project of your many is the Zoe Project, which goes back to the complexities of nutrition and complexities of different bodies coping with different substances. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And does that fit in very much with the notions behind Spoonfed?
It does, these studies started 3 years ago, really when I was starting to write Spoonfed, and I got together with these two entrepreneurs who've been working on the internet, using algorithms on the internet for advertising. They wanted to do some good in their lives. The guys in Zoe raised money so we could do some really major studies in nutrition in order to collect individual level data that we could use for personalizing nutrition. So what we did is we started with 1,000 people, mainly twins in the UK and a few in the US, and gave them identical meals and followed them for 2 weeks, using every medical device we could and measuring everything in them, including stool samples to look at their gut microbes and sugar monitors, exercise monitors, sleep, etc. And what we showed initially really blew me away, because with an identical muffin and milkshake, these 1,000 people had 8-fold difference in their blood responses. These are all normal people.
Mm.
And so for the first time, we're seeing, wow, and then not only was that 8-fold difference, but we also saw that in identical twins. So you'd expect 2 genetic clones to have virtually the same responses. And it turned out that no 2 people really responded to sugars, fats, and inflammation in the same way. And suddenly that was a real aha moment. So, well, if identical twins were different, what about all of us? So how can we then start tailoring how we respond to certain foods in a way that would help us long term by reducing these peaks in our glucose levels, our fat levels, and inflammation, which would allow the body to have much less stress on it long term. And that's what we've done. We've now increased the numbers to about 4,000 people, and we now have an algorithm that can predict about 80% success how you're going to react to any other food once you've done this starting test. And we now give an app that gives all your foods a rating from 0 to 100 in terms of for you personally on how good that is going to be for your metabolism. And you can use the app to design your own food plans, etc. And we've just started at a small level doing this commercially in the US, and it's going to be in the UK sometime early next year. But it's a very new approach about it, because we don't talk about calories at all, and it's very much getting people used to thinking about food in a different way, about how it might engage with their own bodies rather than just eating it because it's available and it's filling. But we hope to increase the diversity of what people eat. So most diets are restrictive, and I think the approach here is that every time you eat of something, it might give you 10 other alternatives that you have thought about eating. That to increase the range of what people eat, because we know that greater the range of plants you eat, actually the side effect is your gut health is very much better. You get more microbes, and your metabolism and your immunity are much better. So, we're hoping this is going to it will take off in a big way, and really start a new revolution about personalizing our nutrition in the future, which at the moment you can only do with sort of self-experimentation, which you have to do a lot of to be sure what's going on, unless you're one of those people who has a dramatic response to fats or sugars. It's quite hard to tell without the technology.
Yeah. So do you think that's possibly a solution to the oversimplification, the bundling of lies and mantras and cliches, to throw that out and to have an app tell you what you are likely? I presume you have to feed it some information to begin with. Is it sort of stool sample information and gut microbiome analysis, and then put your trust in the app rather than in the mantras that idiot TV presenters mutter?
I think that's right. I think this is the era of big data, and when you've got so much data that you can't really make head or sense of it as an individual, you need these algorithms to tell us what's going on. And this is the modern world. Many of the things we take for granted now, like maps, and it's all done through algorithms, because individually we couldn't make those decisions. And so I think this is the future, that it is so complicated, and that you need machines to do this for you, and then transform it back into something simple that is free of commercial sponsorship or politics. And so hopefully these apps will become your trusted guide, your Google guide, your Wikipedia, whatever it is that you think is relatively free, and you can make your own decisions based on that when you go shopping, rather than what the big companies or supermarkets want you to buy.
If it stops TV presenters saying words like good, honest food and people taking that away as the truth, then I'll be a buyer. Now, well, good luck with the book. I look forward to chatting to you again. You've been listening to the Table Talk podcast brought to you by Food Matters with Professor Tim Spector. And we've been talking about his new book, Spoonfed, Why Almost Everything We've Been Told About Food is Wrong. Go and buy a copy now if you can find one. Tim, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to the Table Talk podcast brought to you by Food Matters. Subscribe to get every episode freshly delivered on Apple, Spotify, Google, or your preferred podcasting platform. And to find out more, please visit foodmatters.co.uk.